All right. Of course, you find that when it comes to bringing up examples, you can bring up hundreds and hundreds, can't you? And if we brought up one example after the other example after the other example, obviously, it's going to be difficult if we did that. So what we want to do basically is just focus on one example for the next discussion. Remember, the pet one took us an hour and a half. So what's this one going to take us? And as the hierarchy, remember the law-based hierarchy increases, generally there's more penalty for a sin. There's also a lot stronger emotions usually involved in the sin as well. And so it's a interesting process when we start doing this. Now remember, the point of this discussion is not to discuss these examples. It's to use the examples to illustrate the point, which is that sin is going to stop you with your relationship with God in some way or another. And the reason why it does is it creates insincerity to know and insincerity about love. And these insincere feelings then taint the longing you have for God's love. And this is why becoming aware of a sin, and by the way, aware is only the first thing we need to do, because we need to take awareness. And one of the things we hope to do maybe tomorrow afternoon, if we get to that point, is to say what's beyond awareness, because you obviously need to go through a process to become fully awake to a sin. But at this stage, the reason why we raise this with you is because with most audiences we've travelled to around the world, just even the awareness of sin doesn't exist, the awareness of a problem. And so the problem with that is, if I'm not aware, how can I ever get awake about it? That's the issue. So the phone you're hearing is actually the fire line, so we can't take it off the hook, but we just have to put up with that. All right, so what issue are we going to raise with sex? Well, we're just going to raise a very simple one that's quite sort of easy to grasp and understand, nothing too confronting. Sex, how do you spell waning?
WANING.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, nobody's confronted whatsoever.
Yeah. So you know how most relationships start. There's usually a lot more sexual activity at the beginning of the relationship, and then over time, sex sort of, due to different reasons and even emotional reasons inside the man and the women, affect what's going on. And over time, there's a waning of sexual activity. In other words, there's a less close bond sexually between the couple over time. Most of you don't realise, but that's actually a sin. Interesting. Why?
Mike, you got a protest? No. No.
No protests about that? So why? How is this relate to your relationship with God?
He looks so pained. We've got to give him the mic.
We've got to give him the mic. Right, what's going on, Mike?
Yeah.
My question is the waning the sin itself or the effect of the sin? And I'm sure you're going to go there.
Yes, well, it's like pets, isn't it? You could say having a pet is the effect of the sin. Right, so in this case, the effect of the sin is sex waning over time. So yes, you're dead right. We're talking about the effects. But you see, how to become aware of a sin is to firstly look at effects. Mm-hmm. Most people are not looking at effects. They're not seeing how a particular situation develops over time. Right? And so it's important to look at the effects so that you can start identifying the cause. And as we saw with pets, a lot of the causes are nothing to do with the physical. They're a lot more to do with the emotional and spiritual beliefs a person holds than what's really going on with them physically. Right? And you'll find the same here in this discussion here. Why is, though, sex waning over time a sin? The effect of a sin? Hannah, you want to?
Because God wants us to have a pleasurable life, and sex is such a large part of that.
Yeah, like he created sexual organs for you, didn't he? And part of that creation was that you enjoy them. Yeah. Now that makes sense, doesn't it? Like naturally, he wouldn't create them. So the whole idea of celibacy being spiritual, you can see if we raise that as an issue, you can see celibacy is not spiritual, by the way, right? It's sometimes good to be celibate under certain circumstances.
To
Right.
work through spiritual and emotional issues. Am
Yep.
I off? Yep.
I think you're...
Yep.
Yeah, to work through spiritual and emotion issues, but at the end of the day, that's not God's design for you, right? Now, there are times where you may turn out to be celibate in your life for lots of different reasons, like your soulmate may pass and then you don't want to have sex with anyone else. And so there is a celibacy that's sort of forced upon you, but you can still have sexual activity with yourself, can't you? Right? So there's no reason why that should wane over time. So let's get started. He's brave enough, yeah.
Is it a sin that you are not dealing with the emotional issues that cause the waning?
Well, obviously that's going to be the truth, isn't it? You would think. But let's first discover why that waning over time. Let's look at it from a love perspective, shall we? Why would sex wane over time? What would be happening from a love perspective for that to occur? Can we look at that? So if we go back there and then no one else brave enough. Yep. Okay. So why?
Just go back there, Anne.
Yep. So back there. Yep. Thanks.
We wouldn't be sharing our love with our mate.
What does love do? Like if it's in my power to bring Mary pleasure, would I not want to do that? Can you see that I would, if I loved her, I would want to bring her pleasure, wouldn't I? So the beautiful thing about love is that it's about giving gifts. So sex is not about what I get, it's about what I can give. You follow? So if I am able to bring my partner pleasure, why would I not choose to do it? Can you see there must be reasons, spiritual, emotional reasons why I would not choose to do that, right? So what we need to do is go, right, what would love do? Love would want to give the gift of pleasure, wouldn't it? Love does that. That's what God wants to do with you too. Not sexual pleasure so much, but he gave you the organs, of course, to allow sexual pleasure, but he wants to give you gifts. He wants to give you things. And as long as the desire for that thing is loving and you're going to use it in a loving manner, God is going to want to give you the gift, right? So he wants to give you gifts. And with the partnership, why wouldn't you want to give gift to your partner? If you don't want to, surely there must be an issue of love there, isn't there? Again, can you see we're using logic rather than the conscience? Remember, we could be using conscience, couldn't we? So if I was using my conscience, sex was waning over time in the relationship, and I was using the conscience, and God's going, this is not good, right? Because you'll find that that's how God feels about it. It's not good. If it's not good and God's feeling it's not good, you need to resolve this. Now, there's two ways to resolve it. One is to stop the relationship, isn't there? If sex is waning over time and one or both parties feels I don't have a desire for the other one anymore, then why are you in the relationship? You now have a friendship. So just have a friendship rather than a relationship, right? So we're not in a sexual or romantic relationship anymore. So you should, if you're not in the sexual or romantic relationship with a person, then have a friendship instead, rather than that kind of relationship, right? So, and that then allows the other person to have a romantic relationship somewhere else, doesn't it? Right? So if you and the other person are not feeling sexually like desirous of each other, then you can see by staying in the relationship without that sexual desire, I'm really making the other person also stay in the relationship without fulfilling sexual desire, which is not something that, if I'm gifting pleasure, I would not want to do that to another person. So even if I felt no longer sexually desirous of the other person, I would at least let them be free to have that relationship with someone else. I'd at least do that, right? Even if I don't want to do it anymore. You follow? Yep. That's what love would do. Right? It wouldn't stop the person from having a relationship just because of other problems, like other issues or whatever. Like nowadays, when a couple break up, there's usually financial reasons why they, other things to resolve and friendship issues to resolve and so forth. And why would you not want to resolve those things if there is no sexual desire anymore? And if there was a sexual desire and there's not any now, why is that the case? There must have been a reason why there was some at the beginning. So why isn't there any now? Like, if you would at least need to resolve that too, surely, wouldn't you? Now, what are the reasons for that occurring? Where you might no longer have a sexual desire for somebody that you had a desire for before. What would cause that, do you think? Yeah. So let's start with Anna, go across to Kevin, go back here and over to there.
I know for me in my past relationships, every single one I've grown angrier and angrier and angrier with the guy, and as soon as that grows, it just falls apart.
Okay, so let's look at, so you can see a build-up of anger. Why does anger build up over time? What's going on? Addiction. Well, not necessarily addiction.
Well, you can either...
The fact that you're angry indicates an addiction, but there might be an underlying reason of why the anger is present that you're not facing, right? So what kind of things?
You could be being mistreated.
Okay, so you could be being mistreated. So it's very hard to have a sexual desire for somebody who's constantly mistreating you. How are you mistreated? You could be just mistreated by having to cook for him every day. Right? He could be mistreated by you expecting him to go to work every day. That's not good treatment. It's because it's not responsible for your own welfare in life. If Mary's responsible for her welfare in life, she'd be willing to work as much as I'm willing to work to contribute to our life. Right? Makes sense, doesn't it? If I'm responsible and she's responsible, now we can divide responsibilities if we wish, but me then expecting that responsibility to be adhered to by Mary even when she doesn't enjoy it, that would be quite unkind. And if I continue to do that and Mary goes, all I am is chief cook and bottle washer in this relationship, after a while she's going to be pretty upset about that, isn't she? Like, I'm allowed to go off and do all these interesting things, build places, build houses, go out travelling, whatever, and she has to stay home and be chief cook and bottle washer and care for the kids. You can understand after a while she's going to be pretty upset with that, right? Right? And that, of course, means there's a build-up of anger. If there's a build-up of anger, then obviously the sexual desire will wane. Yep.
And also, I think in the past I've used withheld out of punishment because of the anger.
Correct. Mm-hmm. You get so angry that you go, I don't want to do it now.
Yeah.
There's only, for many women, there's only one way they can punish the man, and that is to withdraw sex. Right? They can't punish the man physically. Usually the men are stronger, right? So you can't punish him physically. You can punish him with the children, which many women choose to do, or you can punish him with the sex. Mm-hmm. Yep. Men also do the same thing sometimes. Yeah. I feel like when the woman is very demanding, constantly demanding, come home and he's got to fix this, and come home he's got to do that, and come home, and after a while he feels like, I'm just going to go out fishing all day instead on my spare time. Withhold that physical affection just so that she knows she's doing the wrong thing without ever having the conversation, really, without ever resolving it through discussion and having it, like a proper, interaction, which might even be like a let them rant for a while action so they can feel what they feel like. Most people want to avoid that, right? So, yep. Okay. So that's reason. We were next to Kevin over here. And on this side, we were...
With this fellow.
You're up? Yep.
Yeah.
No, Kevin's next, sir.
I guess it's the fear of deeper intimacy.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
The fear of deeper intimacy. So fear of intimacy. Now, fear is a false expectation appearing real. So they're not fears are not real, really, right? Of intimacy.
So often it's really about the grief about intimacy, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah. So yes, that can be a reason. So I'm afraid of getting closer. For many men, they're afraid of exposing themselves emotionally to their partner. For many people, they're afraid of exposing emotionally because of what the partner may do with knowing those emotions as well, like whether they make fun of you about them, whether they ridicule you about them. So that often creates these things too. So the fear of intimacy can be created by the partner or be something inside of yourself, and your justification of the fear is yours.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was going to add that there's there's changes that happen, right? Sometimes the initial attraction is based on that desire or whatever it is, or that, it could be addiction or whatever it is. It's all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
But then it also is connected to, as it goes on, it's like, then you realize, oh my God, I'm in an addiction here. And what is it like, and that's how do you go deeper with that? And
Correct.
figure those things
So
out.
like an example of that is a man wants sex every day, all the day, every day. Mind you, why wouldn't you want it every day? Or just, but if he wants it and she doesn't, right? And she's not working through why she doesn't, and he's not working through why he feels angry every time she doesn't. See, you can want it every day, but not have it for a year.
Yep.
And not be angry about it.
Yep.
You follow?
Yep.
So that would indicate, yes, a lot of times the reason why sex is important at the beginning of a relationship is because addictions are getting met full on at the beginning of the relationship.
It's like these romance movies we watch where it's like, oh, you just make me feel so safe when we're together. And the man gets...
I love you so much because of what you do for me.
You make me feel like
you make me feel good about myself.
so mothered. And then that's all intense sexually because there's all these addictions. And then over time it's like, you don't really make me feel that safe anymore. And
Or the person who's making you feel safe, or the person who's making you feel like nurtured doesn't like doing it anymore.
it gets tiring.
Gets tiring.
Familiarity, right? So it's like that.
Well, I wouldn't call it familiarity because myself and Mary are pretty familiar with each other. But I think it's more that over time, you get exhausted with
It's
addiction.
tiring.
It's tiring to meet another person's addiction constantly.
Yeah.
So if a man, for example, has an addiction to be propped up constantly, eventually the wife's going to be pretty angry about that. If the wife has the addiction to be safe and secure and addiction to avoid her fears, and the man's doing that constantly, he's going to get pretty tired with that.
Yeah.
And so what happens over time is initially you go, I'll do that for you and you do that for me and aren't we great? And then over time the addictions all go, oh, it's not so great. These addictions, you start feeling the pain of them. And then in feeling the pain of them, you're now starting to go, oh, well, I don't know if I really want to engage anymore. And I'm sick of this. I'm sick of having to do this for you.
Or and I feel turned off by you. Where once I felt turned on, now I feel turned off because this addiction has not been getting met.
And that's about real communication, right? Like is it communicate? It's obviously
Not just
feeling.
communication.
Humility, yeah.
Yeah, there's a number of issues with it, really, if you look at it. Because you've got emotions
Yeah.
that need to be addressed, that you need to communicate.
Yeah.
Secondly, you've got spiritual beliefs that drive your unhealed emotion. So all of your addictions are driven by false spiritual beliefs. So an example of that is a false spiritual belief about love is a person who loves me will sacrifice for me. That's a false spiritual belief.
Yeah.
So if I expect Mary to sacrifice by staying home, looking after the kids and doing the cooking and the cleaning, and I'm allowed to go off and do whatever, I have a false spiritual belief that's driving my desire for her to do that. And if that false spiritual belief is strong and I'm very addicted to that belief and I don't want to confront it, then I'll argue for her continuing this, what's unloving to herself. Yep.
Yep.
So false spiritual beliefs drive the emotion I feel. The emotion I feel is angry because she wants to go out to work. So that's the emotion.
Yeah.
She wants to go out to work and I'm angry about it. That's driven by some false spiritual beliefs about her, what she needs to do with her life, myself, and what I expect from a woman. These things are spiritual beliefs where I'm out of harmony with love that drive my emotion of rage, saying, you need to stay that way. You need to keep doing what you do for me.
Yeah.
And you can talk about it. You can even become aware, if you like, that this is what's driving the problem. But unless one or both of you awakens to the sin and deals with it, it's not actually going to change the sexual content of the relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens if one person awakens and the other doesn't?
Oh, going to be a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as most of you would know, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so it's really good. It's better than none of you awakening.
Sure.
See, most people think, oh, it's better that both of us don't awaken, or we both do it together. But that's not true either. How is the person who's resistive? Let's say it's me. Let's say I have this strong belief as a male that Mary should be doing what my mother did, which is clean, cook, be a home wife, and basically think that I'm fantastic.
You can
as a
do
part
no
of that.
wrong. You can
I
do
can
no
do
wrong.
I can do no wrong, right? That's what my mother treated me like. That's what my lovely wife is going to do for me.
My mother too. So yeah, there you
Okay.
go.
It's pretty common. isn't
My
it?
many by the way,
Actually,
did not treat me like
Jesus'
Rhoda.
mum didn't do that. But
Yeah, but this is what I'm believing, right? But so I believe all of this, and so now I've got some very strongly held spiritual beliefs which are very focused emotionally for me as well into my worth and all sorts of issues. And while I retain them, I'm going to believe Mary should do this. Now, when Mary decides to grow, she'll be going, I am not loving my partner by doing what he thinks is right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's in a bad state thinking this is right.
Yep.
Right? So Mary would have to then go, I need to make some changes. Right? I'm going to stop doing this thing that he wants me to do. Now I'm going to go probably through the roof.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Given my addictions, I'll probably go through the roof. And that demonstrates my own spiritual problems, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yep. So why now I have a little bit of awareness potentially because Mary who has had the full awareness that it was wrong at this stage, and she's going through the process to become awake, she will start taking actions through that process that cause her to no longer do what I'm demanding of her to do.
Yeah.
In the process of doing that, I will be confronted. That helps me be aware
Yep.
that I'm doing something spiritually and emotionally wrong to her. That's unloving to her. It helps me become aware. Now, if I don't care that it's spiritually and emotionally wrong, can you see now we're going to have conflict?
Sure.
And it's unavoidable,
Yeah.
isn't it now? Because I'm unwilling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we can take that phone off
Yeah.
the hook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
presumably it's not because there's a fire.
I don't think so. I think if there was a fire, there'd be a lot more
There'd
happening
be
around
engine.
the firehouse. Yeah. So you see what I'm saying, Kevin, that if both of us have a desire to love, and we're both sincere about that desire, can you see we're probably going to work through the issue?
Yeah.
But if one of us is insincere or don't have at all a desire to love, then probably we're going to break up.
Yep. Yep.
But is that worse than staying together?
No, it's not good for either soul, right?
That's right. If we stay together in denial, it's actually
Yeah.
worse for us.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, the tricky thing is, and we meet a lot of couples, a lot of them have this tendency to go, I'm aware that he's sinning.
I know what is
I'm
right.
quite aware of all of his issues,
Yeah.
and I don't have a problem at all.
Yes.
He's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, with all codependent addictions where it involve two people, both of you have got problems.
And if you've come together and sustained a relationship, and especially if there was more sex in the beginning than there is now, you both
You
had
both
an
had
issue.
problems. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if the sexual desire is waning, it means that both you had problems that now you're angry about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. All right. Thank you.
Yep. So you can see with regard to the sexual feelings, again, a lot of them are going to be based on spiritual principles. Can you see? Like, so if I love somebody, I would want to bring them pleasure, but also if I love somebody, I'm not going to let them get away with sin. I'm not going to accept that their sin is my, like, that I have to do something about their sin. In fact, if anything, what I'm going to do about their sin is say, I don't agree with your sin. Does that make sense? And I'm going to say, and I don't agree with it enough that if you want to continue sinning, I am not going to stay in the relationship. That's how much I don't agree with your sin.
Yeah.
Right? Now, very few people have that level of, like, commitment to the principle. Yeah, because there's a whole heap of emotions that won't get fed if the relationship breaks up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And God's truth is to have a good sexual relationship, you must be in harmony with spiritual and emotional law, really. That's the only way it's going to be good. Some people engage sexually without having any sensitivity emotionally and spiritually. It never ends well. It never will. And it's never just about sex. Yeah.
Yep. So most things with sex are to do with most emotional and spiritual issues. Remember, the laws that govern sexual activity are actually soul-based laws. So every time there's a soul-based problem in the human, the effect of the soul-based problem is going to be stronger than if there was a physical problem. So, you know, when we talked about pets, I know some of you felt a bit emotional about it, but at the end of the day, it's not a major thing impacting your day-to-day life if you don't have one, right? When it comes to sexual issues in a relationship, it is a major thing in your day-to-day life if you're not having it. And it does become a major issue because there's happiness involved in it, like deep levels of happiness generally. So this is why a lot of the times, you know, the physical issue, easier to talk about, sexual issues, harder to talk about. And this is the trouble, is in a relationship, they need to be resolved for the sake of both parties, actually, not just for the sake of one. They need to be resolved. Now, a lot of counsellors would tell you, oh, you've got to get to a stage where you negotiate. So let's go back to this problem here. We say, you know, sex is waning over time. Let's negotiate. Does that sound good for you already? That you need to negotiate about sex?
We're going to schedule it.
Like, we're going to...
What's a common...
Sunday
how can
morning,
we agree on how many times per week? Okay, 3 times a week. Right, that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Right, here we go. It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. And, like, what type of sex as well? It's like, well, I like this kind of sex and you don't like it, but I need it once a week. So we negotiate, right? It means make a barter. Means to
Reach an agreement.
Reach an agreement.
But we have to...
Each compromise.
Sometimes it means I have to give in to something that he wants and he has to give in to something that I want. And then eventually we go, okay, well, that's fair.
Yep. Yeah. So, like, we could go pretty raw here if you want.
We've gone toilet paper, pets.
I don't think, yeah. No, I don't think you're ready for this raw that I'm thinking. But anyway, so I'll just try to do it in a... You want raw? we'll see. It's sort of like, if you care about the other person, you will love their body as well as their feelings and their emotions and their spiritual direction and their life. You will love everything about them, and you will want to know more about them. right? That's how you will feel. Isn't that how you feel at the beginning of the relationship? You sort of feel like, I want to know more, I want to know more, I want to understand more, I want to understand how your body works, I want to understand how your mind works, I want to understand how your feelings work, I want to understand what you believe, what is important to you in your life, right? And you want to understand these things. Now, if I want that for my partner and she wants that for me, the relationship is going to remain quite strong, isn't it? Because we both want that for each other. But as the anger builds, because of different things we're having to do, compromising, as the anger builds, my desire to know what's going on in my partner is going to wane as well, isn't it? It's going to drop. It's going to go down. We're going to start going, I don't know if I want to know. What if Mary feels that I'm not very good in bed? What if she feels that? Most people would feel like, I don't know if I want to know that. Right? Some will go, I want to know that so that I can prove. But isn't that now sort of like learning how to be more like I'm just trying to find the right word. Learning how to be more satisfying in bed. Isn't it a bit weird in a way that you have to learn? It is a bit weird, isn't it, that the other person has to be told and then has to learn. Why aren't you sensitive enough to know already that your partner's not being satisfied? So can you see how, let's say in a relationship after the years go on, the partner's not satisfied. If you were connected emotionally to yourself and to God's truth, you would know she's not satisfied. And you would already be looking at why. Why is that not the case? You would feel it inside of you that something is wrong here, right? And so you wouldn't have to wait for your partner to tell you something's wrong. You would know that something's wrong, right? And you'd feel it, and then you would have to look at, is it because of things you're doing outside of the sexual relationship, or is there things you're doing inside the sexual relationship? So an example of that is outside the sexual relationship. Am I treating her like she's my slave? Am I treating her like she's my chief cook and bottle washer, as we say in Australia? Am I treating her like she's got to be the person who looks after the kids all the time and I don't take any responsibility for that? Am I treating her like her interests and her desires and her passions are not very important to me? So if I'm treating her like that, then obviously if she has to tell me, there's already a problem, isn't there? This is why many people don't discuss these matters, because when you've got to tell your partner there's a problem, you're already feeling that you're not loved, even having to tell them. You follow? You're already avoiding the feeling of not being loved, and rather than going through that feeling and working through that feeling, a lot of times we want to tell our partner so we don't have to feel that feeling. Right? Rather than feel the feeling that we're not being loved, we'd rather get our partner to change rather than just feel the feeling that we're not being loved. Mm-hmm. Now, the feeling that I'm not being loved may be true, or it may be false, depending on my addiction. If it's true that I'm not loved, then I'll have to come to, eventually I'll come to recognize, wow, she doesn't care for me here and she doesn't care for me there, and she doesn't like me really very much, and you don't have to feel all of that, right? If it's false, I'd come to the conclusion, I've got pretty high demands that I'm dumping on my partner, and I can sort of understand why she's backing off. Because of all my high demands, my feeling of ownership over her or her life, I would feel that as well if I was sensitive enough. So can you see again the spiritual problem and the emotional issues I face are affecting the sexual relationship, right? And most of us think that solving a sexual problem is just solving a sexual one. but actually it's not. It's always an emotional and spiritual problem that causes a sexual problem. This includes with your own body. If you can't perform anymore, that's also an emotional and spiritual problem, not a sexual one. Right? That makes sense? Okay.
A few hands.
A few hands, so let's get started.
Oh, we didn't
Oh,
have.
where were we?
Is it?
I believe it has been said. It was about the waning of sex, and I was thinking, like maybe because there was no real sex to start with at the beginning.
Yeah?
It's kind of like addictions.
Yeah.
And then once you become more aware, sometimes addictions they become like more yucky in some way.
Correct.
Yep.
And
The more
then you
engage.
become more aware of what sex is really about, and you realize there was no love or giving or care for the other at the start.
Yeah.
And then you just realize there's maybe no desire for real sex.
Yeah. For a real loving relationship.
Yeah.
Very true.
And that's why it disappears. There's no desire.
Correct.
Yeah, and then you have to ask why you're then still in the relationship.
And also why you began it in the first
Yes.
place.
And why did you enter such a state? And then why do you stay in it when you realise these things?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. There's it's so complex and
Yeah, but it's good.
it's but sometimes
Because in the end, happiness can come from a good relationship.
yeah.
In fact, one of the biggest happinesses that are going to be in your entire life is a good relationship. Right? So why would you not want to sort out the issues given the fact that happiness can be a fantastic result of that issue, by working through these issues? What we see instead is a lot of people are not working through the issue, and so they stay in the sin of their relationship, not working through the issue, only to be more and more and more unhappy as time goes on with each other.
Yeah.
Not good. When you've got a relationship that's degrading, unhappiness is going to be the result, right? To one or both, probably both of you.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Come over.
To Hillary.
I'm curious about libido waning. I'll just talk about myself.
Same thing. Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. And I'm wondering in this situation if it's because we had lots of sex in the beginning,
Yeah.
possibly more to do with addictions. I'm
Yep.
not totally sure.
Yep.
And then is the waning to do with my own sexual shame, unhealed sexual shame due to how I was raised and society perhaps, and some sexual trauma that has yet to be fully healed? I think so in my case, but
Yeah, many
Curious.
women have experienced sexual trauma in this world. And when I talk about sexual trauma, a lot of people think, oh, we're talking about child abuse or a rape. No, many women have experienced sexual trauma from their own fathers,
Yeah.
in the sense that
Almost
their
all of
fathers have
women.
projected sexually at their
Yeah.
daughters when the daughters were young, for example. Their father might not have acted upon it, but it's still sexual trauma. Many also experience sexual trauma from spirits who are involved in wanting to get involved with the person sexually, and they experience trauma in that regard as well. So for many people, yes, there are sexual traumas that many people have experienced. And certainly once you get over the addictions of a relationship, then the sexual trauma for a lot of relationships will define the sexual desire or what happens sexually between the partner. However, that all being said, still needs to be addressed, doesn't it? So if we're not careful with sexual trauma or with any type of trauma, we can use it as an excuse to continue unloving behaviour. The unloving behaviour is if I love Mary, I love my partner, I will want to bring her pleasure and she would want to receive it. And if she loves me, she would want to receive it. I'm saying she wouldn't, if she doesn't love me, romantically, then she won't want to receive it. And if I want to give it when she does not love me romantically, I am abusing her, actually. Right? For it to work, there would need to be a desire on her part to receive it, and a desire for me to give it, and vice versa, for it to work, right? Now, if that isn't happening, there could be many reasons why it's not happening, but whatever the reason is, it is sinful not to address them. It's actually a sin to not address them. God created you to have a happy life, which also involved so we're talking about happy. He wants you to be happy spiritually. He wants you to be happy emotionally. He wants you to be happy sexually, and he wants you to be happy physically. He wants your happiness in every aspect of your life, not just in one, not just physically where you're comfortable, right? Where people develop comfort in their relationships, but they don't deal with spiritual conflict in their relationship, and they don't deal with emotional conflict in their relationship, and they don't deal with sexual conflict in their relationship. So you end up with just physical being comfortable, but nothing else being great, is what you end up with there. A lot of unhappiness comes from that. You can waste a lot of life doing that. You know, a lot of life on earth wasted just to be comfortable in a physical area, but not addressing the other areas. That's a wasted life, right? So we need to address these issues proactively, not by trying to avoid them. Now, when you have sexual trauma, that's harder to do. And you might need some help to do that as well. And you're going to be very tempted when you have sexual trauma to compromise. Mm-hmm. You follow? But if you love and you hold on to the principles, you won't want to compromise. You want to work your way through it. There's a lot of joy that can come from it, so it's worth working your way through.
And your talks, they're years old now, but you guys did some talks on sex and sexuality that are actually lots of good pointers there for couples to help work through. And so we have and we are, but it's ongoing.
Well, it requires dedication on the part of both. And when I say dedication, if I'm dedicated but Mary isn't, or Mary's dedicated and I am not, then if I'm the one not dedicated and Mary is, she can't push me into being dedicated, can she? Because to do that would be a sin against my will, right? She has to wait for me to become dedicated, and she could talk to me, and she could also leave me.
Yeah. And I can work on my stuff that's in me.
That's right.
All that time.
Yeah. But if you know, so let's say I'm not dedicated at all. Let's say the issue is, let's say that I have, my mother gave me all these expectations that I be the top dog in the family, everybody looks after me, nobody, you know, the man is the central part of the universe sort of thing, and that's the attitude I have and I don't want to work through it, let's say. Eventually, my wife's going to be pretty upset with that. And she wants to work through it, but I don't, because I think I'm getting what I want, right? So I don't. What's she going to have to do? She's going to have to be prepared to enact the principle to the point of the destruction of our relationship. Isn't she? Mm-hmm. That's what most of us are not prepared to do. Yeah. And that's why we stay in relationships long time beyond their expiry date, you could say. Because if I am dedicated and Mary's dedicated, we will work through every issue. We'll even work through eventually the issue of whether we're soulmates or not. Mm-hmm. That'll all be sorted. To do that, I have to be dedicated, and Mary does too. I'm going to cough.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's also a really good resource that Jesus wrote many years ago. Do you remember what it's called? You know the one I mean?
Yeah, I think it's called Love in Relationships, 2007.
Yeah, and we did do a talk on it once as well, which is asking yourself questions like, if I loved myself in this relationship, what would I do? If I loved him in this relationship, what would I do? Yeah, the 4 questions.
And each party needs to ask the 4 questions of themselves. Yeah. You know, what we see a lot is that one party asks the question of the other person and not of themselves. Yeah, you see that a lot. And particularly men are very much more prone to doing that than women too, by the way. So we see a lot of men not asking themselves. They ask what about my partner? She does this, and what about my partner? She does that. But the men don't ask themselves, what are they doing oftentimes? And this is because many men have been brought up by mothers, and many of those mothers have brought up their men to believe they are more important than a woman, fundamentally, because, you know, the mother has taken the role of the nurturing role in the family. She's with the child most of the time, oftentimes, particularly in Western countries. And as a result, the person has grown up to believe he is the centre of the world, right? We met many, many young men nowadays, particularly young men, who believe that of themselves. Yeah. Yep. And I to have a relationship with them would be unbearable, really. Yep. Yep. So that's something that needs to be addressed. Yeah. Be up the back there and then across here.
Oh, yeah. So, Tim, if you just go up the
Well,
back
Tim's
and then...
got his hand up first,
yep,
so let's
yep.
start with Tim.
Yeah.
The reward of being a mic runner, Tim.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the big difficulty with me is, particularly sexually, is always needing to do what the woman wants.
Yep.
That was my overall. I needed to please my mother.
Yeah.
And then each sexual relationship needing to please them, getting into difficulties which I just shouldn't have been having sex at all.
Which makes them feel that they are more important than you, and which makes them feel that they have the right to boss you around. Makes them so. If you look at the sin of it, on your part, let's say, by believing that you've got to please her all the time, like pleasing your mum, and being brought up to believe that pleasing the woman is the thing you've got to do with your life.
To the sacrifice of your own desires and your own will
Yep.
and your own interests and your own everything.
You end up generally attracting a woman who believes that too. And then, of course, by feeding her that feeling, she becomes more monstrous rather than being confronted with the unlovingness of that feeling that she has. You see, it can happen, can't it, with men or with women, like where one has the power. Now, in any relationship, a proper relationship could be one does not have the power, doesn't even want power. In a proper relationship, you don't even want power over your partner on any level, right? So there's a lot of spiritual power issues that people have, whether that's being submissive or being dominant, you know, and these issues need to be addressed. The waning sexual desire indicates there's other bigger issues. Yeah, similar to having pets, indicates there's bigger issues, right? And unless we're prepared to deal with them, and both having a desire to deal with them, obviously at some point the relationship is going to be quite hard to maintain.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. As you know, right?
As many people know
Yeah, yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yep.
So I was going to say you guys hadn't mentioned it yet, but you just actually did. And I wondered, how do soulmates factor into this? Because what if you have a very healthy sexual relationship with somebody who's not your soulmate?
Yep.
Would you leave that in search of your soulmate? Or what if you're already with your soulmate, but you don't have a healthy sexual relationship? Would you leave that in search of a healthy sexual relationship?
We have had many discussions with people about how to identify your soulmate. But the problem is, for most of you, you will not know who that is until you're at what is equivalent of about the fifth sphere of the spirit world in terms of your development in love. And the reason why that is the case is that you're going to have to understand yourself first. And for most people, they have a relationship not to understand themselves, but to get their addictions met. And until you work through your own issues with understanding yourself, you are not going to know who your soulmate actually is. You follow? Now, how does that relate to your question? Stopping a relationship thinking that you know that that's not your soulmate is like, how do you know? If you haven't developed in love of self enough to know yourself well, you won't know, right? But as soon as you know yourself well, you won't feel inclined sexually towards that partner who is not your soulmate.
So
you won't.
You can't actually have a healthy sexual relationship with someone who's not your soulmate if you are that developed as to know who
To
your
know
soulmate
yourself.
is. Yeah.
But I guess my question is, can you have a not healthy sexual relationship with your soulmate?
Of course you could.
Definitely. Yeah.
But again, the same thing I just said applies, right? Why would you engage a sexual relationship with your soulmate when either you don't understand yourself or they don't understand themselves? Why would you even do it? See, there's a moral principle there of why do I engage something with somebody when I believe they're my soulmate, but I don't know myself and I don't know them very well, and they don't know themselves very well. I can't force myself. When I know myself well, I'm not going to force myself on Mary until she knows herself well, and even then I'm not going to force myself on her, right? I'll wait for her to feel her desires. You follow? So either way, the same principle applies. Understand yourself first. Now, for most people, that is a process that takes many years to understand themselves. But of course, if you're dedicated to the process, it can be a lot shorter than if you're not, right? If you're not dedicated to the process, it's going to take all your life on earth and probably a couple of hundred in the spirit world. And then you'll get to the 5th sphere of the spirit world where you start to understand yourself pretty well, right? That's what happens with the average person. The average person who lives a life on earth, this is what happens to them. They pass, not understanding themselves, living in mostly their addictions, and then they iron out their addictions as they progress in love to the point where they reach the 5th sphere. And in the 5th sphere, they start to understand who they are, and also they've healed many of their emotional injuries with the opposite gender, or in the case of a homosexual couple with the same gender, they've basically healed their intergender emotional issues. They're thinking about what men should do, their feelings about what women should do. They heal that. And in the 5th sphere, most people heal that. And then during that process, most people, not all, most will find out, I feel very attracted to this one person. However, that being said, we've met many people in the 6th sphere of the spirit world who haven't met the other half yet, right? And the reason why they haven't is because they've worked through their intergender emotional issues, but they haven't had a longing to solve the issue of why they've been created with genital parts even. And so they've sort of come to believe that they're just going to be friends with everyone. You follow? Just through a spiritual belief. They've come to believe that, not understanding that that's not God's intention. Right? So just because you heal everything, it also doesn't mean you'll have a desire to meet the other half. Right? So you have to do both. You have to heal as much as you possibly can heal in yourself. You have to work through the intergender emotional issues that you have, what I believe a man should do, what I believe a man should get, what I believe a woman should do, what I believe a woman should get. For me, because I'm a heterosexual man, I need to work through all those issues, and on top of that, develop a desire to meet my other half, and then I'll meet her. Right? Now, on earth, there's an additional problem. And that is there's a lot of miscarriages and abortions that occur on earth. The problem with that is that means that many people's soulmates have already passed. Can you see? That then means that, unfortunately, there's many people, the equal amount of people as there is abortions and miscarriages is going to be the equal amount of people who never meet their soulmates.
On earth.
On earth. They'll meet them in the spirit world, but not on earth. So then the question becomes, what kind of a relationship do I engage on earth? Now, in my first century life, I decided because the chance Mary had died, I decided I'm not going to have a relationship with anyone until I meet Mary. And if that's the spirit world, well, that's the spirit world. I'm okay with that. I'm happy anyway. Right? So that's what I decided. You don't have to decide that, but in the end, any other relationship is going to end. So it'd be wise to decide that, but You don't have to because you have free will. Yep. So two people, both who have had their partners pass, might decide, let's live together and enjoy a relationship on earth. And even though both of their soulmates have passed, they might decide that for whatever reason. I personally couldn't do that, but others can for whatever reasons. Yeah.
In the sex issue, I think the lack of forgiveness and the lack of repentance when error happens, because we're still imperfect, and that piles up. People get resentful, and
Yep.
that makes the sexual desire go down.
True, but I would also have to consider in a relationship, why do I have to keep forgiving my partner? Like, so if let's say today my partner does something, like let's say I do something to Mary today, like today Mary is cooking dinner and I let her cook dinner for me, and tomorrow she's cooking dinner again, and then the next day she's cooking dinner again, and the next day she's cooking dinner again, and even she might even say she wants to do that. And I let her cook dinner, and then a week later or 2 weeks later, she's still cooking dinner every night. I haven't done anything. I haven't cooked any dinner. Now, I'm not being self-responsible, right? But I keep letting her do that. Now, why would I if I loved her, would I let her do that? No, I wouldn't, right? I wouldn't let her do that if I loved her. I would say, there's a problem here. If you think cooking dinner every day of your life for all of us is good, you got a problem. Right? And if I think that's good, I got a problem, right? And I would work through that. Now, once I'm at this stage where I see maybe Mary, in the case of I'm saying, no, I want to cook dinner, and Mary now gets upset with me. My role, she might be going, her role is to cook dinner. And when I cook dinner, it makes her feel like she has no role anymore. And I'm going, but this is the right thing to do. And she's going, no, it's not. Now we're in conflict. Now, once we get in conflict, if I just go, okay, I'll forgive Mary for cooking dinner every night, for her desire to cook dinner every night. I know that sounds funny, but the reality is, to stay in the place where this is wrong, I would have to do that every day. If I've got to forgive Mary every day for something she's doing out of harmony with love, and she's got to forgive me every day for something I'm doing out of harmony with love, can you see, forgiveness is not the problem. The problem is we're willing to tolerate something out of harmony with love, and we're willing to say, I'll forgive you for it every single day. That's a problem. That's not how God works. God does not forgive your sins until you're repentant and you change. Right? He doesn't keep forgiving everything. The law says you will change, and if you do not change, the penalty is going to remain. That's what the law does, right? So if I'm thinking forgiveness in that sense, that I'm going to do it every day, my whole spiritual concept of forgiveness is completely flawed. Completely flawed. And it's going to cause major problems to my relationship.
So we need to involve seeking the truth on the issue.
Correct.
I can forgive, but let's find why this happened, and let's find the truth about.
And is it right for me to continue forgiving when the behavior has not changed and there's no desire for the behavior to change?
And repentance. There should be a repentance on the other side.
Well, not should be. You're allowed to forgive somebody without them being repentant. You understand? Mm-hmm. But that's free will. But it's not what God does. When there's repentance, then there's true forgiveness, right? So.
I mean, in order to keep growing as a relationship.
Yep.
I will seek for the other person to repent.
You will seek both.
I will desire that the other person repent.
Correct.
I can forgive, but if I want to remain and growing in the relationship, I will like to see that person repenting. That will be better for them and for the relationship.
For their own sake, isn't it, too?
For them as well, yes.
That's right.
That's
so
what love for them dictates me to do.
That's right. If
Yeah.
Mary's sinning, her relationship with God is damaged. If I'm sinning, my relationship with God is damaged. If Mary loves me and she sees me sinning, she's not going to just go, I'm going to forgive you. She's going to go, you keep damaging your own relationship with God by doing this. You keep stuffing things up with God and with Mary. And if I'm continuously desiring to continue that behavior, then Mary is going to have to make some decisions. So she might have forgiven me, but she's still going to have to make the decisions. And the decision isn't going to be to stay with me. Because you can't continue to tolerate bad behavior from another person, whether they say they're sorry or not. If they act like they're not, then they're not. And you've got to do something about it, for their own sake as well as for yours. Yeah. This is something most of us don't want to do. Right? So if Mary says she's sorry, I go, oh yeah, no worries, I forgive you. But then the next day she does the same thing. If I say I'm sorry, but the next day I'm doing the same thing, am I sorry? I haven't. And also, saying you're sorry is a lot different than being sorry, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a bit like the difference between being aware and awake.
That's
to
right.
sin. Yeah.
That's right. So oftentimes in relationships, what we see is that each party is often sort of aware of the other person's problems, but both parties don't go anywhere towards awakening to those problems and seeing and fixing them and actually repairing them. They just tolerate the problems, and of course that's going to be bad for the relationship. Yeah. Again, belief systems encouraged, but like the whole concept of we see this a lot in psychological circles where negotiation is encouraged in a relationship and forgiveness is encouraged in a relationship without there being any repentance. Now, those relationships will eventually fail. Yeah. Relationship isn't a negotiation. It's two people coming to understand themselves and understand each other and desiring to be with each other without compromise. Mm-hmm. Without compromise of self and without compromise of the other. That's what it is. That's a relationship, and a good one. Mm. Yep. If you've got to forgive a person every single day for the same behaviour, then that's not a good relationship. You're going to eventually get upset with that. You're also not taking action about something that's damaging. Why would you not do that? Why would you avoid taking loving action when you've got the opportunity to take a loving action? There has to be emotional and spiritual beliefs that you have that are false for you to do that. Yeah. And many of our emotional and spiritual beliefs are false about repentance and forgiveness.
Yeah.
We don't understand repentance and forgiveness from God's perspective. We understand it from a human perspective. I don't know about you, but the human perspective is often when you're a little kid, somebody grabs you by the ear and says, you've apologised for what you did. And of course, when your ear's being tugged on, to that extreme, you're going to go, okay, and apologise, but do you feel sorry? Often you just feel like, get that hand off my ear. Not I'm sorry for what I've done. And many parents are very happy to teach their children to say sorry without them being sorry. Right? When you say sorry without being sorry, you create an illusion, and that is a fake thing that's going on now, and you're actually teaching the child to lie by saying they're sorry when they don't feel sorry. Now, of course, I still would need to correct the child so that it feels sorry. So many parents avoid that too. They just say sorry, and then we forget about it. And I'm going, why are you forgetting about it? They're just saying it because it's easy, right? True forgiveness is not, repentance, is not easy. You got to go through the reason why you did the thing and work through that. Now, if I'm not teaching my child how to do that, then I'm teaching them a lot of lies for their future. Yeah? And so that's not going to be good either. And this is why many of us, when we grow up, we believe, I said sorry, so why aren't you forgiving me? Mm-hmm. Right? I cheated on you. I said sorry. Do I have to keep on saying sorry? From God's perspective, what you got to do is solve the reason why you did it, which is a lot more than just saying sorry. Yeah? You want it at the back? Just leave your hand up so Tim can see you.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm thinking about, you said earlier about we have sexual organs for pleasure.
Yep.
Okay, so we have other sexual organs also for pleasure. Like we have our mind.
Yep.
And our mouth.
Yep.
Which we have relationships with food.
Yep.
That we enjoy, but that wanes over time as well. And now is that dependent?
Well, that's because of sins too.
Sorry?
That's because of sins as well.
Okay, but it's...
Anything
but
that
it's,
wanes over time.
yes, but it's singular that way. It's
Sorry?
It's not dependent on like a relationship with others.
Oh, it is.
So I'm looking at, but
You and I disagree.
okay.
Yeah.
So
it is.
I'm looking for help here.
Yeah, far
Okay.
away.
So if my relationship with self is sinned or whatever,
Yes.
or there's work to do with self,
Yep.
whether it's around, sexual pleasure or
Food.
food or whatever other pleasures that we have.
Yep.
Isn't it my responsibility to work on self?
Of course.
Yes. So how would it be dependent on another? Why would there be negotiation involved? Like, wouldn't it just be a natural response to do the work on self and then everything would fall into place? Why would it depend on another human being?
Well, I said there wasn't negotiation involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's right. So where is the work involved? Like, I hear what you're saying and I understand what you're
Well, I
saying.
don't know if you do because it sounds like you're confused.
Well,
The only work you can do is on yourself.
yes.
Ever.
Yes.
Ever.
So when...
But can I point out that if somebody with you is not doing work, naturally there's going to be problems,
Yeah.
Yes.
isn't it? Whether it's a friendship or a love-based relationship.
But is that our business?
Yes,
Yeah.
if you're married.
If I love you, it's my business that
Yeah.
you're sinning. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Is that
That's the
confronting?
part- That's the part that I don't get.
It is
I don't-
certainly my business. If you're
Yeah.
sinning and I love you,
Yes.
then I want to help you not sin, right?
But isn't love unconditional?
Ah, see, this is a false belief about love that's principle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you say unconditional,
Yes.
what you mean is accepting of sin.
Yeah.
No, I mean love is I am love. So there can never be a condition placed on that if it's pure and true. That's my
Then
true
why did
nature.
God make laws?
Well, tell me. That's why I come today.
Because it's loving to provide a structure.
And I hear all your principles, but I don't hear a solution.
When you say you don't hear a solution to what?
Like to the issues that we might have around forgiveness or negotiation. I mean, those things have to be worked out.
I agree.
Yeah. So
But before they can be worked out, you need to identify them.
yes, yes.
And what you're saying is love doesn't have any structure, and I'm saying love does.
No, love does have structure. It's just pure. It's unconditional.
We'd
It's not unconditional. The structure means there's conditions.
Yeah. Structure is inherently conditional.
Yeah.
And just because you don't accept a person's sin doesn't mean you don't love them. In fact, it is an expression of your love to not accept, their sin. Because if I accept their sin, then I'm supporting their sin, which is going to cause them to sin more.
And it's also an unloving act on my part to support your sin. So if people in the world are like destroying the environment, and I support them in destroying the environment by saying, oh, love is unconditional, so I need to love them while your definition of love is false if you believe saying nothing is love.
Yeah.
Well, love doesn't accept abuse. It's not like
So
that.
now you're breaking your own law.
No,
Yeah.
no. There's love.
I think you and I are
that
just
is-
going to disagree.
Yeah.
So when then?
You're going to find in your future that there is a whole lot of structure involved with the laws surrounding love. And you're going to find in the future, whether it's now or in the spirit world, see, at the moment you have a false spiritual belief about love,
That it's unconditional.
that it tolerates everything.
Oh no, I don't think it tolerates anything at all. I think it is pure in its nature. It's a spiritual thing that we are love. We're born with love.
No, that's not true either.
No, that's not true.
That's not true either.
Oh, then prove it to me.
Well, have you noticed what's happening in the world?
Yeah.
Because that's not a product of love.
If we were born
And if
with
we
it,
were
no, there
all
wouldn't be the
pure
problems we
love,
currently have.
We wouldn't have any of those problems on Earth.
Okay, so I'm indigenous here
Yep.
to this Mi'kmaq, to this land.
Yep.
And back in the 1300s, Europeans started to come.
Yep.
And us as Mi'kmaq people, we have this thing called Nadugalimk, which it has 7 sacred teachings that come with it.
Yep.
Now, when the Europeans came and colonized,
Yep.
instead of hating, we loved and welcomed
Yep.
unconditionally.
Yep.
So that was the teacher of the eagle that taught us the sacredness, the link to our sacredness.
Yep.
Not the human being, not the physical, but the spiritual, the sacredness. So when this happened, we accepted it. We weren't conquered. We accepted it, and we kept our principles of love intact so that we could coexist.
But respectfully, I think you were treated very badly, yeah?
Yeah.
I think the native peoples of this region...
That's a belief. That's a belief.
Well, no, I
That-
think when
It's
bad
a
things
reality.
happen to people, that's a reality.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That is true.
that's a reality,
But
not a
But
belief.
it's also a belief system that we can be victimized by that and say,
You see,
know,
now
we
what
were
you're doing
treated
is you're
bad.
modifying emotion to suit. You're creating a belief to modify your emotional response. And this is not something we promote doing at all.
No, and I get what you're saying, but that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm saying
that's
that
why
It
we
is.
just...
we have to coexist in this world. And we have to accept certain things.
No,
I
you
don't believe you have to accept abuse or domination
No.
of your
No.
native people.
Tell me more then.
I'm not saying that you would respond unlovingly to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that you would not accept it. It's sort of like in a relationship. So here I am, I'm treating Mary badly, let's say, in a relationship. If Mary has your attitude, she would keep just saying, okay, it's okay to treat me badly. It's still okay to treat me badly, right? You're shaking your head,
No,
but
that's not my attitude. My attitude is that we do not accept abuse.
but
we
you're
do
saying
not- but we do
saying
not love.
Well, the only way to love,
is to take an action that doesn't accept the abuse.
yes, and to deal with whatever feelings are in you surrounding the abuse. If you just say, I'm just going to choose love as a result of being abused, you're actually disassociating yourself from the very human responses that humans
That's
are
not
on
what
with
I'm
it.
saying. What I'm saying is when there is abuse that comes at me, I have work to do on my
Why?
acceptance of abuse.
Why?
Because I love.
But what if the other person is the other person is expressing free will? They're saying they want to abuse you.
Yes.
It might not be your fault at all.
Of course
There
not.
might be nothing in you that causes them to deliver that abuse.
That is true.
Nothing in you.
Absolutely.
You might be perfect and they can still abuse you.
Yes.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not
That
right
doesn't-
to say that you got to look at yourself for the abuse.
To do.
No.
Because
no,
it's
no.
the abuser needs to look at themselves for the abuse.
No. I'm saying that if I hate or if I disconnect or if I have to negotiate with that person, then I am stepping out of my sacredness. I'm violating love.
I agree with those three statements, yes.
Absolutely.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
So
But that's not what you were saying earlier.
No.
So,
Yeah.
and this is the thing, is you're philosophizing so much about love that you're not feeling about it anymore. And-
in my culture, in my spirituality, love is not like what you're talking about. Love is, I am love. I don't give it or I don't receive it. I am love.
That's not true.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's not true from God's perspective. That is an untrue belief.
Okay.
right? And you're allowed to believe it because you have free will,
Yes.
and you use that belief to avoid a lot of emotion. I understand, but it's still an untrue belief. The reality is that God created you with the ability to learn what love is, right? You are not automatically love. You must learn what it is. And to learn what it is, there's two ways to learn. One way is by you working through the love that's inside of yourself and working through what love means and what love is. And the other way is to receive some love from God and learn what it is through that experience. But these beliefs that you have currently, which I understand come from a long chain of beliefs created in your history, which, by the way, other beliefs are very similarly oriented. They have assisted your culture to become more loving, but not in a way that God defines love to be.
I hear what you're saying, but that's not true because we have to
Well,
test our love.
Well, now we need to stop the conversation.
Okay.
You and I need to stop because everyone's here to listen to what we're teaching, not to what you're teaching.
I hear you.
Right?
I hear
So we
you.
need to stop the conversation. We are in disagreement, and that's okay for you to be in disagreement. I'm saying to you, your ancestors now know that a lot of what I'm saying is actually true. And we can talk to them at a different time. We can talk to them, but they also understand the emotional reasons why you are holding on to the belief you currently have.
Mm-hmm.
And this is your own ancestors that I'm talking to about that, and we can talk to them if you wish. But while you are so strongly holding on to a belief that is out of harmony with the reality of what love is, it will bring you harm in your future.
Thank you.
And it has brought them some harm in their spirit life.
Mm-hmm.
It's slowed down their progression in the spirit life as a result.
Yes.
Right?
And when that happened, it was from colonization because we were here, like since time immemorial, living in harmony with the land under the principles of Nadugalimk.
You weren't living in harmony with God's truth. You were living in harmony with some of God's truth, which is a different thing. And this is what we see in every culture on earth, indigenous or otherwise. There are certain factors, there's certain things that they've lived in harmony with truth, and there are certain things that have lived out of harmony with truth. It's the things out of harmony with truth that are going to cause you your future problems, not the things in harmony. So there's certain areas where I can agree with you that are in harmony with truth, and then there's certain things that are out of harmony with truth that I can't agree with you, and that are also, unfortunately, going to cause you problems in your future. And you don't believe that or accept that at this stage, and I understand that, but you will come to see at some point in the future that what I'm saying to you is correct. Right? I'm also saying that, right? And that's as far as our discussion can probably go.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Mandy.
Thanks. Just still on your question that you had for us about the waning desire.
Yep.
So you start a relationship just purely based on sexual attraction and chemistry. And then, of course, that's going to go down over time because
what we call chemistry is often addictions, codependent.
That aren't really about the physical form.
That's right.
They're about
They're right.
emotional exchanges
Exactly.
that are happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's define chemistry. It's not a sort of magical thing happening at a chemical level.
Pheromones.
But it does produce, your addictions do produce pheromones under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Right. And the other person can be attracted to those under certain circumstances. So that's worth knowing. Mm-hmm. But it's a physical aspect of your body that produces it based on your emotions and your feelings. Yeah.
So you're starting the relationship not based on wanting to learn about the other person. It's just this feeling that you have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there she is. Like that kind of thing. And a lot of times that happens not because they're soulmates or anything else, but it's because that person in the room meets my addictions the most. Mm-hmm. And so there's a strong level of attraction. Makes sense. And while that is the case, we'll be sexually attracted to each other And then as time goes on, the sexual attraction will wane because the addictions get tiring to satisfy. Yeah. Which is a design, by design. God's designed it that way, that your addictions get tiring to satisfy.
Yeah. It's a good
on purpose.
Good operation of the law, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a part of the penalty of living in the addiction, is that eventually they become tiring to satisfy. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Good. Leslie.
Just wait.
Microphone, Leslie. And up to your chin.
Thank you.
Yep.
See if I can remember what I was trying to ask. Is it sort of by definition sinful in God's eyes to have a relationship then if you don't know yet? You know, we're not in the fifth.
Very good question.
Or
is it sinful in God's eyes to have a relationship with someone that's not your mate?
Yes, and the other part of that, is we need to sort out our gender bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's probably easier to do that with the law of attraction in a relationship. So does that fit
not always.
in the mix? Okay.
Yeah, not always, hey, because if you're in a codependent addiction, that gets very hard to work through issues in a codependent addiction. Oftentimes in a relationship is drawn to us in a codependent addiction, and it's only after time that we realise the addiction was the problem. So sometimes it can help us work through our addictions. Yeah. But sometimes it's more powerful to work through addictions alone than it is with a person, right? Of course, the best way to work through your addictions is with God, because God can share what all of them are and what the problems are. And also receiving God's love helps erase the causes of many of them as well. So that's the best way, right, to deal with your addictions. But the first part of your question is it a sin to be in a relationship that's not with your soulmate? And the answer to that fundamentally is yes. Because it's not your design. God didn't design you to have lots of sexual relationships with different people. He didn't design you to also have a sexual relationship with someone who's not your soulmate. He designed you to have a sexual relationship with your soulmate. That's the fundamental design, right? Now, anything that breaks that fundamental design is out of harmony with God's version of what love is, but not out of harmony with human love. Do you understand the difference? With human love, there are many things with human love that are not God's version of love, but are the love of the perfect natural man, right? So God has higher principles that are beyond love of the perfect natural man. And one part of those highest principles are the whole way he designed your soul. So fundamentally, you don't actually have a sexual attraction. You have a soulmate attraction, which is often expressed in an unloving way sexually, right? But it's actually a soulmate attraction. So if you think about the design of the soul, the soul splits in two halves to incarnate. So spirit body, physical body. So if this is the male part of the soul, let's say male body, male spirit body, right? And on the female side, obviously, female spirit body, female body. God designed that this soul would have the only sexual bond. The sexual bond is a part of the love bond between the two halves of the soul. The energy God designed to actually work best with the other half of your soul, right? That's how God designed it to be. Now, God knows that many of you have not been educated in regard to this matter. He knows that. But when he put the very first human couple on this planet, he put them both at the same time, created a body at the same time, both bodies at the same time, and put them on the planet. They were soulmates. A woman and a man were soulmates. They were two halves of one soul placed in this physical form. And that's the perfect condition. That's the condition that God wanted us to have. That's the condition that God knew would bring us the most happiness. That's the condition. Remember, all laws are about bringing you happiness. They're not about trying to restrict you or control you negatively. They're about trying to bring some happiness to your life, right? And all the laws governing the interaction between two halves of a soul are based around the two halves being soul mates. If we look at the contrary, the opposite thing, when a person comes on earth and they basically start seeing themselves as this, right? If they see any connection with another person at all, they see themselves separate. The male separate from the female, right? They see themselves as separate individuals. We're not. There's one soul expressed in bodies. One part of the soul is attracted to bodies that are female, and another part, potentially, depending on the makeup of this soul, to male. If the makeup of the soul is dominantly male, then both bodies will be male. If the makeup of the soul is dominantly female, then both bodies will be female, right? That's what God designed it to be. Now, so God designed that the sexual attraction that occurs between you and somebody else is actually not a sexual but a soul-based attraction, which is sexual and romantic in nature. It's an erotic love expressed just between the soul halves. Now, God did not design this soul to share that with others.
So by definition, any sex with anybody, so-called sex, is going to be damaged if they're not your soulmate. It's going to come from a non.
It's going to create problems, yes, in your future that you'll need to
It's
resolve.
it's not real sex the way God meant it.
No.
In a sense. Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
No. Yep. Now that's pretty confronting, right? It is. Yeah. It's like, I want to choose my relationships. What if my soulmate has died? What do I do then? Or, this is where you start making, should we call it, compromises of principles, spiritual or emotional, to do with the makeup of our own souls. The most happiness is going to come from understanding the truth about everything, right? That's where the most happiness comes. Now, of course, in the developmental phase of your life, during your teenage years in particular, that's when the hormonal systems start kicking in, right? During usually that developmental, what we call puberty, the hormonal systems start kicking in. As they start kicking in, that's when a person starts to realize they want to have a relationship, a special romantic relationship with somebody. You follow? They want that, right? So before then, they didn't really want that, right? They might have had these interests in the other gender or same gender. They don't really know. But a lot of those interests were not romantic, right? But when it comes to romantic interests, that happens usually through puberty. And God designed the body to go through puberty so that it would trigger the desire for your soulmate. Makes sense, doesn't it? Like he designed it so that you would learn that, I can have a relationship with somebody that's romantic, right? But what we've done on earth is we've distorted that quite a lot, through time and through beliefs, through spiritual beliefs that are false and through time. We've distorted the concept of who we have a relationship with. As a result of that, most of us look for somebody who matches not so much our personality and nature, but someone who we can live with. Someone who, we often call it attraction, but it's actually really someone who accepts my addictions as they are, and I accept their addictions as they are, and they accept my desires as they are, and I accept their desires as they are. And we do that because we're in our injured state. We do that. Now, God knows that humans were going to become injured. So he knows that you are going to, at some point, get to this point. He also knows that the only way you're going to find the other half is by developing yourself to the point where you become more in alignment with God's truth about who you are, right? So he knows that. So he knows it's a growing proposition, a growth proposition where you're growing. But imagine for a moment, if children were educated in a manner that they used the time up to puberty to discover who they are and be who they are.
Not the opposite, which is mainly what happens on Earth at the moment. Yeah.
And imagine that. By the time they started to go through puberty, they would already know to a large degree what their personality is, what their nature is. It would be highly likely under those circumstances that as puberty develops, their desire for their other half would increase. And because they already know their nature, their own nature, they would also recognize the nature of the other half.
Who they were.
Who they are. That's how God designed it to be. Anything else other than that is a distortion of God's design. Now, God knows that humans would distort the design. And so God has allowed for this process to occur, particularly on earth, but also in the spirit world, a correctional process to occur where you eventually come to the conclusion that God created you to come to, which is there's only one person for you out there somewhere. Make sense? That's the conclusion he designed to be the conclusion by design, you know. And so this is what we've got to, when we're coming from a condition of sin to a condition of truth or sinlessness, we've got to understand that God's not going to say, I'm going to punish you for everything you do wrong up until that time. The way God treats sin is this. Every sin we engage, including having sex with someone who's not our soulmate, you're already feeling the penalty of it. Yeah. Right now. It's not going to get any worse than it is right now. It's just going to get potentially better. You follow? Yep. So God designed it that way so a lot of times, many of you believe that, the way you see sin is that God's going to punish you for your sins. The reality is your life is already a reflection of your sin right now. And many of you think, where's the punishment coming? And it's already there right now. It's already happening right now. You understand?
Yes.
So many of us get worried, I'm going to sin by doing this relationship, I'm going to sin by doing that thing, and I get worried and it all get complicated about all that. But why? Because what's happening right now is already the results of our sin. Anywhere that we're out of harmony with bliss, where we're out of harmony with God's love, we're already receiving the penalty right now. It's already there in our soul right now. It can only improve by becoming aware, right? And yet most people still don't want to be aware, only not understanding that if you're not aware, it can only degrade, really. Or you can mistakenly improve, but that's pretty unlikely if you're not aware, right? You're just going to go around being unaware, doing a whole heap of things and hoping that one of them turns out to be the right thing, and this is how many of us live our life, right? We go around doing thing after thing after thing after thing, hoping that the next thing we do will work out better, without any real knowledge of why it might work out better and what governs it working out better. Like that law governs it working out better. Living in harmony with the law governs this solution to our problems. Most of us don't see that. Most of us feel, instead of that, I'll just try a new thing and try another new thing and hopefully something good will come out of it. And then what happens to many, unfortunately, which is even worse, is that after trying many new things that do not work, you get tired. And you get exhausted with them not working. And so you decide to not try any new things anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's even worse place than trying new things. Because now you're never going to work out what was the right thing unless you do some things to change things, right, in your life. So it's very important to understand, yes, God designed a design. It's perfect. Where we are now is imperfect. And the consequences of the imperfection are already being felt by each of us as individuals. They're already present right now. It can only get better by becoming aware. Yeah?
That's a big relief. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very reassuring.
Yeah. So when it comes to, should I be with the person I'm with? I don't know whether they're my soulmate or not. You don't know whether you might have attracted your soulmate already. You don't know. So why would you leave them until you know? And then also, why wouldn't you try to know? So a lot of people we talk to about the relationship issue, they go, oh, in the end, I want to be with my soulmate. So I don't really want to have a relationship with anybody until I'm with my soulmate. And it's sort of like, and the person I'm in a relationship with, I want to break up from because they're not my soulmate. But how do you know? Until you know yourself very, very well, you are not going to know. And then on top of that, if you're connected with God and you know yourself well, as soon as you meet the other half, you will know. But then they've got to go through the same process too. So it may be some time after that before you get to even together, right? You might take time, and most people do. So up until then, you've got to treat growth as a constant thing, change as a constant thing. The biggest issue we see for most people on earth when it comes to hearing truth is they still don't trust it very much. And therefore they don't engage change. And fundamentally that's because they don't trust God very much. They don't trust God's design very much. Yeah. And that's something to address. God knows what is best. He's already designed your whole soul, not just your half. He's designed it already. He knows the ideal happiness for you in your future will come from you understanding that yourself. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Kevin, you're straight behind.
You said earlier, if I understood correctly, that in the spirit world, you would recognize your soul mate on the fifth sphere or something like that.
Usually.
So, but if I understand correctly, in the physical world, we're nowhere near the fifth sphere.
Correct.
We're whatever, middle of the first or whatever, or
Hells,
lower.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're in the hells, yeah.
So the question is how does somebody here kind of, I understand the desire. I understand that teaching young people to connect to that.
Yep.
But what kind of sphere would they be in here if they were physically able to see that?
Fifth sphere.
Wow. So my other question then is, are there people here right now in this fifth sphere?
No.
So that means a lot of us just have no clue.
No clue.
How to find our snowmate.
Correct.
Okay. Got it. So we got some work to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Most
lot of
people have no clue. And when I say most, I'm talking about almost everybody.
Yeah.
Completely everybody almost.
Right.
Have no clue. And the main reason why is we also have no clue about who we are. Oftentimes we're living in facade and we have all sorts of injuries and we don't understand the difference between our injuries and our personality. Many people think they have a certain personality, but actually that's an injury. And many people think what I think is an injury happens to turn out to be their real personality, and things like that. So, yeah, the reality is no one on earth, with regard to in their first incarnation, no one on earth is in the fifth sphere.
And my question.
Or the fourth.
But you've said you've been able to identify the two of you. So does that mean that you are in that fifth sphere?
I had to reach the seventh before I could identify Mary.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm in the fifth sphere yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
It only requires one half.
Okay.
To identify the other, doesn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yep. So, yes, it's confronting, I know, to hear these things, but it's true. The issue we face is, how do I really understand myself first? So that's the very first thing I need to focus my attention on. How do I understand myself first? How do I work out who I am? as God intended me to find out. In that process, you finish up also understanding when you meet the other half who they are. Now, that all being said, many of you were born within 50 kilometres of your other half. In fact, almost everybody on earth is born within 50 kilometres of their other half. Almost. Right? What's that? You have kilometres here, don't you? Yeah. And certainly within a couple of 100 kilometres, generally, is the other half. The chances of you meeting them is going to be determined by how much you come to understand yourself and how much you exercise a desire to meet them. Now, can you see when you're in a relationship already, you don't have a desire to meet anyone other than the person you're in a relationship with? Yep. And that's understandable. And that's why God doesn't share with people who are in relationships who their soulmates are. Yep.
So I was born in England, moved to Canada when I was 4 months old.
Right. Yeah, this is the thing nowadays,
Lots of
isn't it?
people, right?
Yeah.
So
where are they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if you were the first person born of the two halves, and the second person didn't get born within the 4-month period,
yeah,
she'll be Canadian.
Got it.
But if you were born as the second half, and your soulmate older than you,
yeah,
she'll be English.
Got it. There you go. All right, got some searching to do, I guess.
But of course, but because then it's like, which half of us was born first? It's like, isn't it? Like, and this is the thing, most of us don't know, and therefore don't really. But most likely for yours, going to be English or Canadian. Yeah. Highly unlikely she'll be like Australian.
Oh, and I lived in Australia for 2 years when I was between 4 and 6.
Oh, well, she might be Australian too.
All right.
Because if she was born,
yeah,
if she was conceived during the time you were in Australia as a child and she
Yeah.
came after you,
yeah,
she might be Australian.
all right. So
Now she might be Australian,
yeah,
or Canadian, or English.
all right.
And
Got a little
Kevin-
traveling to do.
The issue in today's world is she might live in Africa.
Fair enough.
She might be Australian but live in Africa.
Yes. Yeah, I got it.
Who knows? And because of the movement of people on Earth now is quite different, isn't it? And you know, years ago, obviously that movement wasn't possible, and so it was more highly likely you would maybe meet, you know. But again, you think of all the people, like if you have a child, you think of all the people your child knows, but you don't. There's 1 degree of separation, and yet you don't know them. Yeah? You know, sometimes we see soulmates 1 degree of separation away from a person, have no idea. We've seen soulmates sitting in the same room with each other, and they have no idea. Yeah. Sorry? Can we identify them? Well, yes, the more connected with God you become, the more you can identify the soulmate of another person. Am I going to answer who yours is? No. You understand? And yeah, and the reason why is because you need to go through this beautiful process of discovering who you are and attracting them through your desire to attract them.
Yeah, and honestly, you can be in opposition to who you are. And then meeting your soulmate is actually quite challenging, speaking from experience, because they are, if they're more developed than you, they're reflecting your personality, and you think that's a bad thing to be, you know. So the more that you do on yourself to love and desire what God made you, you know, your uniqueness, the easier it will be to identify them, but also the easier the time you'll have together. Yeah.
If we as a culture started to really focus on children and the
Spiritual and emotional development of children.
Spiritual and emotional.
Yep.
Dealing with our addictions with children, because
Right.
most people are in
Terrible
extreme
addiction
addiction
with
with
their
kids.
children,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And but if we were able to somehow make that shift,
Yep.
that could change significantly within a generation.
Correct.
It could.
Yeah.
Correct. The next generation of children could find their soulmates before they're 20.
Yeah.
Yep. And as a result, be quite happy as a result.
Wow.
Yeah. Even if they are in sin. maybe. Because they'll have different other sins, maybe, but
It's a nice thought, isn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not as hard as I shouldn't say it's hard.
Not as hard as you think. Yeah.
It could be. It could be much easier.
Correct.
Yeah.
God designed it to be very easy.
Yeah.
And it could be a lot easier with a few small changes. I think when we're coming from a place of sin, often we don't realize that every change we make in harmony with the principles, it's much better.
Yeah.
Because it feels so hard to make one change, we're like, oh no, it's going to be, and it'll only be a little bit better. But, just changing a couple of things with the way kids are raised could really transform societies all over the world.
Yeah.
I've in my work, I feel that I've just been so mind-centric for such a long time, and trying to figure out the connection, the heart connection or emotion.
Yep.
That's the hardest thing, because everything was mind-centric, right?
Yeah, I was the same.
So yeah.
Yeah. When I was in my 30s, I was just total mind.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And most of the 14 who've returned are in total mind.
Yeah.
And not in their souls at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite a difficult process to get out of your mind when you become so dependent upon your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you.
Well, guys, it's 4:30, hey, and we said we'd finish at 4 o'clock today, but so we've just gone on a bit longer than we wanted to. Now, that was a discussion about about sex. It was meant to be. In the end, got a bit waylaid onto other subjects, but as you often do, hey, when we're discussing truth, that's often the case. But can you see? I just want to remind you again in the morning. What I'm going to do is remind you of the principles again. The principle is that the sin that we imbibe. Remember that the sin has a hierarchy, just like the law has a hierarchy. And the sin that we imbibe is going to greatly affect your ability to engage principles that are going to govern your relationship with God. Right? And if you continue to engage the sin, then naturally what's going to happen is that the desire in your soul is going to be insincere when it comes to receiving love from God or receiving truth from God. And so it's very, very important to come to terms with that inside of yourself, that oftentimes it's the work you do with your sin that is going to help you establish more of a stronger relationship with God than any other thing. Because that's what's going to govern your sincerity.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the more you do it, the more faith you have that it works, which also helps your relationship with God.
Yeah. Yep. All right, well, let's finish for tomorrow, eh? Those of you who want to come tomorrow.
Yep.
Thank you.